out of their busy schedules to come and join me here today. So I'm extremely excited about this event. Why? Because it is like no other that I've ever done in Jamaica before. So if you've been a client of mine or if you've been following for a while, you know we've done events like this. But typically it's exclusively immigration as it relates to family-based immigration. But what I realized in my journey here in developing the Kingston location is that there is a huge gap. There's a huge gap for Jamaican professionals, investors, and just Jamaican business people in general. And once I realized that gap, I said, I have to give that gap significantly more attention because there's definitely a need, right? So there's a need, for instance, for the person who they are subject to the limitations of a B2 visa, right? But they also don't want the restrictions of a green card, right? That's one of the big gaps that I've realized with professionals here in Jamaica. There's also a gap in terms of the professional that wants to plant their roots in the US, create a business or to transfer a business to the US, but they do not know how. Why? Because there are compliance issues, there's different states, there's tax, there's a host of different issues that a Jamaican national will encounter that you will not know how to solve that problem unless you have a professional there with you, right? And then the other gap is for the person who just wants to make an investment to diversify their portfolio, etc. So extremely excited about this event so I can answer those questions and hopefully close the gap for people who have those issues or you fall into that group. We'll have a very esteemed guest today, Attorney Sekou Clarke. We work alongside each other with, a lot of huge cases. She has managed over 100 million in terms of investments and contracts for different private and public entities. So the way how we will set up tonight's agenda, we will first deal with the immigration portion as it relates to entrepreneurship, business, investment, and then we'll take a break so you can have some refreshments, and then we'll actually jump into the actual contracts, business formation, business establishment in the US. So I want to have it as interactive as possible. I don't want to be here just talking. I'm sure you've been talking all day. People bothering you, calling you. So we'll make it as interactive as possible. I'll try to do the presentation through your questions as well. And we'll just have a free flow from there. All right, so again, thanks everybody for coming. I definitely want to thank the team for putting together this event. And let's jump into it. So, as I said, when it comes down to Jamaican business owners and Jamaican investors, who here owns a business? All right, most of the crowd. And does anybody here have a business in the US? Or a couple people? Does anybody here have any aspirations of owning a business in the US? All right, so most of the people. So what I've realized is there is this huge problem that I have with some clients in the sense that they start a business in the US, right? And they travel to the US on a B1, B2 visa and say, hey, I have my B2 visa which I can do business on, right? So, based on our culture, we think that that is okay. And then what I see a lot of people run into is they travel into the US, say they have a warehouse in the US, or they have just a satellite office. They go and they stay for 2 months, they come back, they work here, they see their customers and their clients here, then they go back to the US and spend 3 months. What has been happening now, it started in the Biden administration and it has gotten increasingly more rampant under the Trump administration, is once you try to enter the US and they go back on your immigration history and they see that at any point you stayed in the US for over 3 months, then they flag you. But the way how they flag you is very interesting based on the clientele that I have. If they flag you and they realize that you don't have major assets or you don't have major roots in Jamaica, they start canceling the visa. But if they flag you and realize that you're an established business owner, you have roots in Jamaica, then they, as we would say, give you a apply. But as I've been seeing with Europeans and other nationals, is that they're even starting to revoke those visas. So that creates a huge problem, because once you have a visa revoked, any other visa that you try to apply for, you have to do an additional step with a waiver. So that is where the E2 visa comes in. And when I just started the office in Jamaica and I had the first 3, I was very, very surprised, because in terms of getting a visa date, it's significantly faster than any other visa. So we can get an E2 visa date at the consulate here in 8 weeks. So what is an E2 visa? And it's one of my favorite, it's my second favorite visa for Jamaican business owners and entrepreneurs. Why? Because it allows you to automatically just start a business or invest in a new business, right? So what the law says, the E2 visa requires you to make an irrevocable investment in a new or existing business. So what does irrevocable mean? And a lot of people, the first question I always get in a consultation, they're like, oh, okay, so I can move 100,000 in this business account and then take it out back? And I'm like, no. The US government wants to see you spend that money. They want to see you use it for either the rent, they want to see you use it for inventory, they want to see you use it for marketing. That money has to be spent. So the next question that I always get is, all right, well, how do I know what is the investment amount? Well, the law says it has to be directly related to that business. So say, for instance, one of our first E2 visas in my firm was a fencing company, right? And the investment that person made was $40,000. The next couple investments that were made were by girlfriends. And the girlfriend would ask their partner, I want to have a salon, I want to have a nail shop. And we can say, all right, 50,000. But then when I have a different type of investor who wants like a medical facility or a warehouse, then it has to be directly related to that industry. So we cannot use 40,000 for a medical supply. We cannot use 40,000 for a law firm, but we can use 40 or 50,000 for a nail salon. So the investment has to be related to the industry. The next problem that I run into with 90% of my Jamaican clients, which this is the most important part for E2 visas, L1 visas, and EB5 visas. And can anybody guess what is the most common problem that I run into and that my office runs into? Who wants to take a guess? Anybody? Nobody? All right, it's accounting, right? So the big problem with accounting is the US government wants to see streamlined financials. Everything has to be accounted for. There has to be a source of funding, meaning they have to see where $100,000 came from, how it turned into $100,000 into the US, how it came from Jamaica, how it got into that Jamaican bank account, and how did that business owner earn that, and is it consistent? Also, do you file taxes for payroll? Are you paying payroll on those taxes? So that's the biggest issue that I tend to run into with my Jamaican nationals, is the accounting. It's not as streamlined as they would like. So that typically slows down the process for us, because we now have to internally get our accounting team to bring it up to speed to what we know that file would look like. All right, so there's the irrevocable investment of funds, there is source of funding, and there is making the investment that is directly related to that business. But once we line all of those things up, the E2 visa, it allows for you to, one, get a visa where you can travel in and out of the US at will. You'll get it for 3 years. You're able to get a social security. You're able to make money in that business. you're able to expand on that business, you're able to bring your spouse, and you're able to bring your children under 21. It does not lead to a green card, unfortunately, but it can be renewed in perpetuity. As long as the business is active and it's profitable, and you have hired at least 2 to 3 U.S. citizens or permanent residents, you can renew it for, I've had people on their E2 for 3 cycles, which is 15 years. It's from a different firm, but you can renew it for as long as the business is ready. So I think this is a great visa, because another side issue that I see a lot of Jamaicans have is the Jamaicans that have green cards. And the problems that they're running into now is they're not meeting the residency requirement, right? So now they run into problems where they try to enter, and the officer is saying, hey, you're using this like a visa. You're supposed to be living here, right? You're supposed to be residing here at least 6 months out of the year. And for most Jamaican business owners, that is not ideal. The timing might not be right. So the E2, because it's fast, and you can actually change your status with an E2 visa, meaning you can enter the US on a B1, B2 visa, and while you're there, decide to file the E2 and change the status to an E2 visa. So I love this visa. Knock on wood, we've had 100% approval rate with the E2 visa out of the consulate here. They know us personally they know us by name at this point. So definitely one of my favorite visas. Can anybody, or who has any questions as it relates to the E2 visa?
Can you change, you have an E2 visa, can you actually become a green card holder during the time that you have an E2 visa?
So the E2 visa itself does not lead to a green card, right? It doesn't lead to a green card, but you had a different process. Say you got married to a U.S. citizen, or you have a U.S. citizen child that's 21 years or older, you can start that process with the E2. You can start the green card process while you're on that E2 visa. So everything that I'm discussing right now, you have it in the booklet there. All right, so you can follow along. So in terms of what are the best type of businesses to get your E2 approval, the ones that we've done before with barely any pushback, that involves providing a legitimate service, restaurants, retail, consulting, and logistics. And it's also good for families. Like I'm doing one now where the brother owns 50% and the other brother owns 50%. So now 2 families can go up from 1 company, right? So amazing visa, like as I said, if you are having that issue where you're not quite ready to live in the US full time, but you still want to get your business set up, you still want to have a social, you still want to businesses and hire people, this would be extremely, extremely good for you, all right? So before I touch on the L1 visa, another gap that I realize is for professionals, right? So who are the professionals? The professionals are anybody that has an advanced degree, or you have a niche area in terms of your employment. So say, for instance, you're a pilot, or you're an accountant, or you're an attorney, right? But you don't want to move to the US based on business, right? There is no the EB1 and the EB2 NIW, which they're extremely, extremely good visas to have if you have an advanced degree, right? Or if you have a profession which we can define as a niche, or if we can have extraordinary ability. Right, so granted under the EB1, extraordinary ability, we've done that for athletes, we've done that for entertainers, but recently we've also done that for engineers, we've done that for forensic accountants, and we've done it for high-level professors as well. And the beauty about it is that it's an actual green card. It's not a visa. So once you petition for the EB2 NIW or the EB1, it is an actual green card. So a very, very good opportunity. And what I've realized in having the firm in Jamaica is that there's also this gap of information. People don't know that, oh, I can actually do this instead of moving to the US and getting married or waiting for my child to petition for you. You have these possibilities out there. And again, for the professionals, I love it because a lot of professionals in Jamaica, especially if you are not the CEO, but you are the talent, right? You are the star of the show in the business, whichever industry you are in. It's really, really good because we can show that you have extraordinary ability. And typically a green card would take you from the EB2 NIW or EB1 out of Jamaica, anywhere from 9 to 18 months. So really, really good card. Any questions on that? What's the? Okay, so, no man, I heard him, thanks. All right, so the monetary requirements, so this was what I was discussing before. And if you just came in, I'll do a quick recap as to why I like the E2 investment visa, especially for Jamaicans, because it fills that gap for the investor who the B1, B2 visa is not enough, but the green card, you cannot satisfy the residency requirements, right? You don't want to actually live in the US, but you want to do business and have the benefits from having a business there. So the E2, in terms of the investment, it has to be related to the business. So there isn't a particular dollar amount per se, right? So like, that's why I said, we've done a fencing company and it's $40,000. We've done a nail salon, it's $50,000. We've done a medical supply company or a medical spa, then you're looking at $250,000, $150,000. So what we would do is we would look at the Department of Labor and we would also do our own research to examine what that investment is for that type of business and the industry that it's in. All right. Chad?
Greetings. So there's a perception that once you have a business in the United States that your income is taxed worldwide. For someone who has an E2 visa, for example, and they have business in Jamaica and business in the United States, how is tax treated with?
So that's a very good question, right? And my rule of thumb is if you're making money in the US, right, if you have your business incorporated in the US, you will have to pay taxes on it, right? But what I've learned recently, I mean, you have paying taxes and you have paying taxes, right? So one thing that we do under Consulting is once you embark on that journey in having a business in the US, then we set you up with the appropriate tax professional so that you can have that tax strategy from day one, right? There's definitely benefits if you have dual citizenship or if you're just on a visa and you still retain your Jamaican citizenship, there's definitely advantages to that. But from day one, we make sure to set you up with the proper tax professional. But to expand on your question, say you had a business in the US and then you still have your Jamaican passport, but then you decide to have another business in Dubai, would you be taxed by the US in that? No. No. Only if you're a US citizen.
And similarly for your Jamaican business, income earned from that Jamaican business would not be a part of the tax authorities in the US, right?
No. Okay. No. Good question, though, and it's definitely one of our most popular questions. Next question as it relates to the E2. That's it. All right, so let's move on to the L1. And I would say the L1, it's my favorite one because it gives you a little bit more than the E2, right? In terms of the actual option that you do have. And I think it's probably like 50-50 with the amount of L1s that we've done as it relates to, or as we juxtapose it with E2s, right? So the L1, you're a business owner in Jamaica. your business is incorporated for at least 2 years, right? Meaning not when you started it and you started making money from it, but when you actually registered it. And I've had this issue with clients where they say, no, man, I have the bank statements and everything. We've had this business for a while. But I'm like, when did you register it in Jamaica? And sometimes they fall short. So the U.S. government, they want to see that this business has been registered for a minimum of 2 years, right? They want to see that you have at least 6 to 8 full-time employees. And that's the other issue that I tend to run into is I've had clients come before me and they've had 20, 30 employees, but none of them are on payroll. They're all getting paid cash, right? And that does not fly. They have to be on payroll. They have to see that you're actually paying taxes and not taking advantage of these employees. That's what they say. So you have to have at least 6 to 8 employees on payroll. And the requirement is you are now setting up a subsidiary company in the United States. So say you have a Chad, right? So you have a consulting practice here, right? You meet all of the requirements. And you are interested in the L1 visa because you want to now have a presence in the U.S. Once we've checked out the box that you are 2 years and you have the required employees, then now you have to set up the subsidiary company in the U.S. So you also have to be either 50% owner or 100% owner of that subsidiary company. But the major point is you have to be an executive in the Jamaican-based company, right? You can't be at the manager level. You have to be like CEO, founder, CFO. And the beauty about the L1 visa is that now you're able to transfer yourself or transfer an executive level employee to that company that you created in the US. And for me, I feel like this is a game changer because I know there are so many business owners here, there are so many business owners in Jamaica that have that aspiration, but they don't know the technicalities of it, and they prefer to say, all right, you know what, I'm just going to open this business and I'm going to have my virgin or my sister or my cousin put the business in their name and do it, and they know they're going to have to pay the friend tax, right? Or at some point, 50% of the profits disappear. But they don't realize that, no, you can actually have this business, set it up as a subsidiary, and transfer yourself as an executive. So now you're able to work in both companies, right? Or you can even stay in the U.S. company, but you still have to maintain the Jamaican company no matter what. The beauty about the L1 is that after 2 years, you can upgrade it to a green card. And you can bring your spouse and children under 21. And there's no limitations to the amount of locations you can now open from that initial subsidiary company. All right, any questions? And again, one of the biggest pitfalls that I have run into is again, accounting. I don't know what it is, but even once we get to the accountant, it's like we have to chase them and the documents aren't proper, but that's like the most important part. We even hold on to files that we do not file any L1, E2, or EB5 if the accounting isn't to the standard that we know that the US is looking for, because that's one of the fastest way to denials. Accounting, and you cannot prove source of funds. They want to see a direct paper trail as to where that money is coming from. The L1, we've had 2 cases in 2025 that was approved in 1 4 days and 1 5 days. And I'm like, it's either the people that they have work in the L1 and the L1 and the E2, either they're happy to just not deal with visitor visas, or they don't understand it. But, well, I'm sure they understand it. but they have been approved in 4, 5 days. The average time that we see them approving, if they're done premium processing, none has been over 30 days. All right, so amazing visa to have if you are that person who you don't quite want to move to the US just yet, but you want to earn US dollars, or you just want to expand your business, you want to expand your reach. And one of the benefits of having a business in the US is that it automatically gives you credibility in Canada and the UK and in some European countries. All right? So let's move on to the EB5. And the EB5, it's definitely one of my favorite ones as well, but it's not as popular ones compared to the E2 or the L1. So what the EB5 requires is $1 million investment or 800,000. It depends on the location, right? So say if your business is in a targeted employment area, pretty much country, then you can do an investment of 800,000. Or if it's in a metropolitan area, then it's $1 million, $1,050,000. And what it requires is the upfront investment of that money. You don't have to be 50% owner of the business, and you don't have to be 100% owner of the business, as long as that investment leads to that business creating 10 jobs. So that's the major difference between the E2 and the L1, is that the EB5, once you have this investment and it creates 10 jobs, you directly get that green card. So people always ask me, they're like, all right, does it have to go directly into a business? Can I use real estate to meet that $1 million mark? And the answer is yes, it can, right? If you have a holding company or if the business owns that real estate, you can definitely add the real estate to that investment. On a side note, people always ask me, they're like, hey, I bought 2 homes in Florida, one cost $200K, one cost $500K. Can I get a visa from that? Can I get a green card from that? And the answer is no. In order for you to get any type of immigration benefit from real estate, right, it has to create some type of jobs. So we can use real estate under the E2, and we can use real estate under the EB5, but we would have to do it where we are setting up pretty much like a, either like a rental company or like a property management company that owns these properties. It has created the jobs to maintain these properties, and that is the way how we can do it. So that's also like an extremely common question that I get as it relates to real estate, right? So there we've done the E2, we've done the L1, and we've done the EB5. So one thing that recently came out, recently meaning over the last 2 weeks after I've prepared this presentation for you, and it's now the gold card. As you know, if you've been following U.S. immigration, President Trump, every week is something different, right? Every week is something different. So the gold card, there hasn't been a lot of information on it until recently, but what they did say is that it's going to be available starting December, I want to say December 13th or 15th, to where you can gift the United States $1 million. And he said, it is a gift. And you will now qualify under the EB1, meaning you have extraordinary ability, because guess what? You have $1 million to gift Uncle Sam, and they will give you the green card. So that will open up in December, right? It will not replace the EB5, right? And there's no benefit from that $1 million. The only, and another category to it is that if a company gifts it on your behalf, then it's $2 million. So, and you can get the gold card and you can get the green card. So essentially it is purchasing a green card. So they haven't released a whole lot of information, just that it will now be qualified under the EB1 extraordinary ability, and that's all we know, but we're on top of it as well. All right? Any questions? I'd hope so. I'd hope that you're getting something other than just a green card, right? But unfortunately, as of right now, based on the information that they have, it's really just getting the green card, and that's it. Yes.
My question might be a little convoluted.
Okay. That's why we're here.
But yeah, we're briefly all right, so I think the main thing I'm trying to get from this is how it's possible to connect all two. So for argument's sake, I have a business in Jamaica. It's not incorporated for 2 years yet, so you've already explained that one part. Sure. All right, so again, convoluted question.
Okay.
So, for argument's sake, you have a business registered in Jamaica. You already have a U.S. business that's already incorporated. My aim has always been to traverse the path of the E2 visa. So that's been my strategic goal, so to speak. The more I'm getting information from what you're saying, there might be other opportunities, but let's give a certain scenario. Let's say I use the established U.S. business to then per se invest in real estate or find that real estate. Can I then use whatever real estate that is established under that business to then use a different path, for example, the L1 that you were speaking about earlier? Like I said, it's convoluted.
Yeah.
The reason being, going back to the whole issue with the tax code, because whatever is established under one business, everything is being considered separately. But if it's a faster process, meaning, okay, it just requires for you to have that certain amount of investment to say, okay, I'm going to use that property or whatever, or that's going to be another challenge. Using something that's already established under one company to establish another link to get in a different process. Again, it's convoluted. I probably have to write it down on paper. But it's basically what you were saying. You structure the E2, the L1, and the EB separately. But let's say if there's a way, instead of me traversing one process just by the E2 and I already have the US business, if I can look at a different method of connecting those two together. Make sense?
Kinda.
See, convoluted.
But the first thing I would say is you'd have to pick one, right? So if you already have an existing business set up, is it just a shell business or is it actually functional? Do you have any sales?
So,
or is it just the incorporated shell business that's there?
So I'll answer it this way. I just filed taxes for the U.S. business, right? So I'm waiting for that to be processed. I filed for the BOIR and everything like that. So I'm actually just getting to the point where I filed taxes for the business.
So you're making money with the business?
Don't use that word. Making money is a different. Let's not get
Okay, so you filed taxes. Okay.
There you go.
All right.
So, like I said, the most I'm getting out of this is that the E2 process has been a very, very long and frustrating process, and the more you started it, the more information I've gotten. That's the biggest
It's
benefit.
really not. It's really not. Are you doing it by yourself?
For me, here? Yeah,
That's why.
But the more you spoke about the other avenues,
Yeah.
the more bells start popping up in my head. I'll give a different scenario. So I have family who are in the States. They have established businesses.
Okay.
So when you explain the other pathway to say, okay, if I now become an investor in their business, establish there, that's another pathway for me instead of waiting for this long drawn-out E2 process. Or even so, the Jamaican, having an established Jamaican business where I then have to reach 2 years and then also have a certain amount of employees, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, so like as I said, you'd really just have to pick one. So based on that example where if you have a family member that already has a business, that's the easiest E2 to do because you can actually just say, okay, I want to purchase half of that business. I have to be 50% owner. So we'd have to make a determination as to what is the value of that business and what would that investment look like. And it would be literally do share purchasing agreement to where you're now 50% owner, and that's 75% of the battle. So that would be a clean-cut, straightforward way because you already have the existing business. So remember, with the E2, it can be a new business or existing business. The key is that you're at least 50% owner. All right? Any questions?
Right. So, an example, as a management consultant who is a sole trader, wanting to do or have a footprint in the US with another management consultant who is a sole trader in the US, would the E2 be the best option to form a company with one sole trader, another sole trader in both companies?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad you asked that question because I tend to get it a lot. Like if you are, again, you're a solo, right? And you want to get those benefits in the US, right? You want to have that footprint. Definitely getting a partner, right? And either that partner, are they a foreign national or are they like a US citizen? So if they're a US citizen, you can say either I will purchase the entire business from you or I will purchase 50% of that business, right? And the reason why it works better when you're buying an existing business is if you're doing the E2 from scratch, you would have to show that you're purchasing items related to the business. Whereas when it's an existing business, it's really just purchasing the shares of that business, or you're injecting capital into that business. All right? Any questions?
Not
Yes,
to
Counsel.
overwhelm you, right? If I'm interested in one of these visas, and each jurisdiction has its own peculiarities with licensing and different regulations. If I want to make an assessment as to whether or not I can operate the business there myself, or if there is a need for particular licensing or structures, does your law group assist in disseminating that information?
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for asking. And we'll jump more into that. And that's what AMP Consulting does. So that's another gap that I realized when I have clients that take on the journey. I say, okay, I'm ready to start. I'm ready to do this E2. I'm ready to do an E2 or I'm ready to do an EB5, right? And now you're making an investment in a business. And anybody here is savvy when it comes down to business. You know it requires due diligence, right? You have to look at the bottom line. You have to look at all of the licensure that is required for the different jurisdiction and any type of compliance or governance issues. And that's one thing that we do as a service for our clients is to provide those type of resources. All right?
All right. So following up on that point. All right. So for argument's sake, let's say the person in the States, they've been running a business, but that business isn't, I would say, for a lack of a word, official because they haven't registered that business. But you recognize the potential in that business and you now want to go ahead and invest in that business. Is it something that you guys would help to liaise with them to say, okay, let's get your business established, and then that could also be the pathway for me to become a part owner in that business? Say, I'm going to invest, get you registered, get you up to speed, or is that a case where they have to do everything first before we even start the process here?
No, so we can do it either way.
Okay.
Midway or from grassroots. All right. All right, so what we'll do, we'll take a quick 10-minute break, get some refreshments, and we'll come back and we'll jump into the actual business formation and business development portion. All right? Cool, yeah.
Yes, apart from the investment of the dollar amount, we do have persons like a team put together. They're helping with the overall operations, marketing, etc. However, we haven't assessed the value that each person is bringing to the table. So do you guys have like a strategy that you use to evaluate the market value that each talent brings to the table? So when it comes on to, because I know that the 100K, that's the dollar amount that should be invested. So do you have a strategy in place in terms of assessing each talent that would add towards that 100K?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, that would go to the due diligence as well, right, to see if it's viable, and assessing the market is a part of it, right? But in terms of the advice that we would give you, it would just be based purely on data,
Okay.
right? So it would be, the strategy would be contingent on what's more important to you. Is it more to get the immigration benefit or to have a profitable business, right? And we would provide you with the resources to say, okay, here are some options in terms of business that are potentially profitable and that would align with your lifestyle and your goals in the US.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we'll take a quick 10. Please have some refreshments. I don't want to bring any of this home or have them throw it away, so 10 minutes and we circle back, all right? right, so we're about to get ready to jump back into the second half. All right, so one thing that I forgot to touch on, which is important to some people as it relates to the investment portion for the visas, right? With the E2, the funds can actually be gifted or you can actually do a loan. And that still qualifies for their source of funding. And you definitely have companies in the US that facilitate that as it relates to real estate. And I didn't even know until the last 3 years as it relates to real estate, as a Jamaican national or as any foreign national, you can actually still get a mortgage from a US company in the US, right? It would be at a higher deposit. It's at 30%. But the funny thing about it is a foreign national has almost a higher chance of getting approved for a mortgage than somebody that actually lives in the US. So very, very interesting. Another point that I wanted to touch on, well, a couple more points. So you have significantly successful Jamaicans, right, who are business owners, entrepreneurs. But what about the people who are successful entrepreneurs? They want to move forward with an E2, L1, EB5, but they have a ding on their immigration history, right? Ding on their immigration history, meaning at some point they had a visa revoked or something along the lines, right? And there is a resolution for that. So we've done something called a Haranka waiver, right? So it's a 212D3 waiver, whereas if you're a professional and you want to do the E2 investment, you want to do a L1, but you have had inadmissibility issues, then that's when we would compile the 212 waiver for you. And business professionals do have a higher chance of getting that waiver approved. So within the waiver, what you have to prove in a 212 waiver, right, is you have to prove that you have some intention of returning to Jamaica, which is why the E2 and the L1 visas are good, because you cannot do the 212 waiver with a green card. You can only do it with an E2 or L1 visa because you're showing some type of intention to return, right? And you also have to prove that you are established in Jamaica, you are providing some type of economic progress is what they want to see. And they also want us to prove that you are not a danger to society. So a really, really good waiver for business professionals who they're on their second or third half life and trying to restart. We've done those well. They also work for athletes and entertainers. Another type of visa, right? It's not an E or it's not an E or an L, but you do have H1 visas. You have the H1B, you have the H2B, you have the O1, and you have the P1 visas. So those are for either highly skilled or as they classify, unskilled. So for an H1B visa, and I'm sure you've probably seen this if you watch the news, it just went up for companies where now if you're doing an H1B visa, that company now has to spend $100,000 for you, right? But there are exceptions if that profession provides some type of national interest, but they determine if it's of national interest. Usually it's with medical, engineering, something service that will be of benefit to the US. So with the H-1B visa, you would have to have a US employer petition for you. The H-2B visa, it's different in the sense that you're unskilled. So these are seasonal visas. They're typically for 9 months. You still have to have a petition from an employer, but you don't have to have the advanced degree. specifically for unskilled, like in industries such as tourism and hospitality. Those are the type of industries where you have the H-2B. With the O1 visa, that's also a good visa if you are a professional. Like, say, for instance, you wanted to work your way up to a green card in the US. Say you have advanced degrees. You have advanced degrees whether you're here and you're an engineer, you're a doctor, you have a lot of certifications, and you wanted to start in the US to where you can enter the US, probably start an internship or start at a job that is, I mean, of course it's going to be lower than the job you're in right now, but you're able to enter the US as someone with extraordinary ability. So you can do that with the O1. It's a great visa instead of a student visa that limits you to work, but you have to have an employer. And you have a lot of employers that are looking for O1 visas right now, and you have to have extraordinary ability. People used to know O1s exclusively for athletes and entertainers, but it definitely works for professionals as well. All right? So we're going to jump into this segment as it relates to consulting and how do you actually start the business, right? How do you avoid a lot of the pitfalls that I see even Americans run into when they start a business, right? And you're moving to a whole different country, a whole different environment, different compliance, and I made sure to have a professional who's been in that space longer than I have to help us to walk through this area. So help me welcome Attorney Stacey Pierre to the floor. As I said before, Stacey and I, we have worked a lot of cases together as it relates to corporate and business practice, from formations to trust. And one of the most underrated things in the US as an entrepreneur or a business owner is getting your business trademarked, right? Because you can actually build your brand, build the name in the US. It's making money, and somebody can actually take it and start doing business on it, right? And the thing that protects you from that is trademarking. Extremely, extremely important. So we'll start from the top. We'll start from the foundation, which is setting up the structure. I'll have Stacey jump into that. We'll ask each other questions, and if you need clarification on something, just jump in. All right?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I work alongside AM Consulting, and as the slogan states, that he is making sure that not only are you bringing your business to the U.S., but you're actually investing in a business that will be profitable and successful. So I come in where I ensure that the business that you are investing in is worth it, it's profitable, and it's an actual good investment. So I'll go through each segment. As you know, it's 4 counterparts when you're first establishing a business. So we'll start with the foundation, and I'll stop in between each section just to see if you guys have any questions and things of that nature. So when it comes to foundation, a lot of people come directly to the U.S. and immediately want to open up an LLC. An LLC is a business entity, but it's not the only one. Depending on the industry that you are investing in, and depending on the type of business services, whether it's product-based, logistics, distribution, all those companies that were listed, you may also need maybe a nonprofit, maybe a corporation, and maybe an S Corp, which is not a business entity, but a tax election, and a lot of people get that confused. So you can set up an LLC and then require an S corporation for tax purposes. And as Sekou said, we do have an accounting that will establish what level you are and what is most beneficial for the business type that you have. Does anyone have any questions in regards to foundation? Before I deep dive, okay.
So hold on. So in terms of the LLC, right, there's C Corp and there's S Corp, and that's something that you elect right at the formation, right?
Yes, you can.
And what's the major difference between setting up your US-based company as a C Corp versus an S Corp?
Okay, so an S Corp, like I stated before, is a tax election, and it avoids you from being double taxed as on a personal side and on the business side, so there are many advantages to that. However, corporation requires shareholders and different type of legalities that are more profitable for investors. So typically, when someone is going to invest in your business, they would prefer a corporation because it requires shares and it requires a more structured way of assessing the business, the assets, and the valuation.
Okay. And when would be a good time, right? So somebody here, they just moved to the US, right? And they say, okay, I'm going to start this LLC. How do they start it?
So, okay.
If you're in Florida.
All right.
What's the first thing that you would do?
So, well, I have to be biased. The first thing I'm going to do is do a name search for you guys because I do specialize in trademarks. I am not going to have you invest into a business that you cannot expand, whether it's going to be a franchise, whether it's going to be growing multiple locations, and just complete ownership. You have to own the name, own the brand. So I know we're in Jamaica. I'm going to give you guys an example. So we have Juicy Patties. You can't go in the U.S., and now they have expanded to the U.S., you can't go in the U.S. and find any other Juicy Patty. And if you do, there needs to be a cease and desist sent because they own that name, okay? So they own the framework, they own the branding, and they own the reputation. And that's what you guys want to do because the money and the time and the efforts that you guys are putting into coming into the U.S., you want to make sure that you're the only one within that industry, unless you're investing into, for example, a franchise or someone else's business and owning a percentage of that. So the first thing I would do is run a name search to ensure the name availability. Once the name availability is available, the next step is we will ensure what type of business structure. Again, that is a consultation I do recommend with either an attorney or a tax accountant to disclose the type of business, the profit revenues that you anticipate on having, and how quickly you anticipate on having that. Another thing is the amount of employees that you may have. These are all essential questions to determine which type of entity type works best for you. If we're just starting out, we'll go ahead with the most simplified one, which is an LLC. And for example, if we are incorporating in the state of Florida, we would go ahead and move forward in registering that business in Florida, which is SunBiz, and then we would be getting an EIN. So now there's two different ways. You can either get an EIN if you're going to go 50% with a U.S. citizen or someone that has a Social Security, or we can go through the I-10, which is basically if there is no social attached to the business at the time. The easier way, of course, is having someone in the U.S., but there are pros and cons to that 50% share, and I'll get into that when we start talking about contracts.
Okay, so since you touched on contracts, right, because one thing Stacey does a really good job of, right, is, and I see this issue with not only Jamaicans, but a lot of just non-U.S. citizens, is you start this company, and you have a family member or you have a friend and you guys are, and you say, all right, you know what, let's just start the company. And you do not have an operating agreement. You do not have a partnership agreement. And for me, when I hear that, I'm like, it is a quarrel, right? And you haven't established, okay, how can I get out of this? Can I even get my money back? And then that person lawyers out before you, and then you're either stuck with all the debt of the company, or the business gets sued, and you didn't know that you're the main person that's going to take the hit for that lawsuit. And I mean, the U.S. is so different, right? It has a robust legal system for a reason, and people can sue you for the smallest amount of things. So the operating agreement, that's one of the first, well, that should be the next thing that you do if you're deciding to start an LLC and you have somebody else, even if it's your wife or your husband or your mother, you have to have that operating agreement. So walk us through how you structure your operating agreements.
Absolutely. So with the operating agreement, we're covering all the bases, things that you don't consider. What I always say is do business with anyone like they're complete strangers, and do business as though you're going to appear in court. What that means is no handshake deals, everything must be in writing, and the more clear, the better it is if there is any conflict to directly address, okay, in this section of the agreement, we agreed, here is this, here is that. Another thing I wanted to touch on, I know we have to have 50% in business. When you do an operating agreement, you don't necessarily have to have 50% in voting rights. So we can own half, but I can own a percentage, a higher percentage in voting. So that way you can control your company, although you don't have that presence in the US just yet. And that is very essential because a lot of times you're relying on family that are willing to agree to something for now, and once they see the value and the profits, they now want to take full control of your idea, your business, and your profits. You're sending the money, you're investing, and now they're saying, you know what? That was my address that you used. That was my name, and I want that. So what we do is we avoid all of that by creating an operating agreement. That operating agreement will even cover you in the event something happens to you. You get injured, you're in, there's something where you don't remember your memory or anything that is causing damaging or a financial strain on you, you can now pass that business to someone else. There's ways that other people can control certain things. You all may have children or spouses and things like that. The business partner that you want, if something would occur, doesn't necessarily need to have full ownership of what you've invested in. You can pass that along as well. So the operating agreement protects that. The operating agreement protects voting. The operating agreement also discusses when and where you need to disclose financials, which is very important. You're investing in a business that you may not be able to oversee on a day-to-day basis. So let's schedule scheduling meetings in which they're required to disclose information for you. So whether the financials, the losses, the profits, and where your money is being invested. There's also different things in that agreement that will cover not only the financials, the control, but also if you want to bring additional members, employees, hiring, and day-to-day operations. You can delegate exactly what they control and what you guys control as well.
Nice. So no handshake deals. It doesn't matter. It does not matter if it's your mother. Have her sign the documents. Have her sign
Absolutely.
the contracts. All right.
All right.
All right. So moving on to.
So we're going to move on to protection?
Yeah.
Okay. So as Sekou started off and letting you guys know the importance of trademarks, this is something even in the US-based businesses that they forget. A lot of, whether you're an athlete, celebrity, you need that trademark, but people always refer it only to athletes and celebrities when you should be determined. Anybody that has a US-based business should ensure that they own the name on a national level. So a lot of people often say, well, I have an LLC. I started the business. I've been running the business for 5 to 10 years. That doesn't necessarily mean if you open a business in one particular state that someone else can open in another state. So oftentimes, a lot of Caribbean people either go to Miami or New York. So if you open up a business in the state of Florida and you have that business running, that doesn't stop me from opening up a business in New York. And now we both have competing businesses, the same name. What makes the determining factor of ownership is the person that files for a federal trademark. I know when you hear federal, people get nervous, but that just says that you don't own the name in your particular state, but you own it on a national level. So anywhere you see in the US, someone using your name, we'll send them a cease and desist, and they will have to now end their business and restart, rebrand, and it can be very costly. So I always want to ensure our clients are not on the wrong end of a cease and desist letter. Yeah. Any questions on that? Yes.
How long does the trademark process take to be finalized?
Okay. So unlike the LLC and incorporation, which can be anywhere between 14 business days, maybe 30 if it's backlog, trademark process takes 6 to 8 months minimum to review and then almost 12 months to be established. However, the moment you should file for a trademark is as soon as you are considering the business name, and you'll realize time goes by very quickly, and our office provide live updates and letting you know exactly where you are. So the first step would be a comprehensive search to ensure the name is available so that you can do minimal investments until we hear back from the USPTO. So we don't want you to spend too much money in not investing in your business, but in the branding and marketing of the business. So that means, yes, you can invest in a minimal logo, some packaging, or what you perceive that will be profitable and able to make the money. Once you own the name, free game.
Is it inexpensive?
It can be, because similar to the different business types that you can start, the trademark falls under different entities. So for example, you may say, you know, I want to start a clothing brand, right? And you're starting with t-shirts, that's in one class. Then you want to sell water bottles or merch of that nature, that's another class. And then if you want to expand to providing services, that's another classification. And each classification is $350 US. So not including the services. So it can get costly depending on how many classifications, type of applications. Yeah.
All right, so one of the most common questions that I get as it relates to just moving to the US to do business is bank accounts. Getting a bank account set up. How does that even work if you have a Jamaican passport?
Okay. So if you have a Jamaican passport and you don't have a business partner that's owning 50% of the business, 50% of the business in the US, then what you would do is use an I-10, which is going to use your passport information to establish your US presence in the US and then open up that bank account.
So, sorry to cut you, sister. So, an ITIN, right? That's an individual tax identification number, and anybody can apply for it, right? So, a lot of people in the US, they use that in the place of a social security number. So, if you have an ITIN number, ITIN, you can use that and open up a business bank account also.
Yeah.
Would you need a social security number to go with that, or it can work independently?
Independently.
And that comes with the incorporation of the... And that comes with the... upon incorporating the company or the corporation?
No, so you're confusing it with the EIN number. So
Okay.
the EIN number comes with the incorporation, right? So one thing that you have to remember, right? The business, once you start a business in the US, it has its own identity separately from you, right? So the business will come with an employer identification number, but then the ITIN, if you don't have a social, then you would need to get the individual tax identification number.
How do we get that?
You just apply, like
It's on the IRS. You apply the form, and it's basically saying that you are filing taxes in the US. So that's really what they want to establish. They want to make sure that you are paying Uncle Sam when you're in the US.
All right, thank you.
However, right, well, or not however, moreover, there are also banks in the US in which you can apply without the ITN number to open up a personal bank account, right? But to open up a business bank account, you do need to have either a social security number, an EIN, or an ITIN. You can open up a personal bank account number by finding the list of banks that you can actually go with a visa and open up a personal bank account. Typically, they'd want to see your passport along with some other form of identification and a valid visa. Yeah.
I think we had another question. No? Okay. All right. So I just wanted to piggyback on the banking as well. I always like to tell my clients you are under a microscope when you're doing your business financials and keeping things separate. Because like Sekou said, there are a lot of times where in the US you can get sued really quickly, and we want to avoid you being sued on your personal assets or your personal ownership. So you're separating everything from business to personal, and you're never commingling, which is mixing the two, to ensure that the courts can't say, well, we can't determine what's business and what's personal, so we're going to attack both. So at all times, once we establish that formation, it's all about making sure you guys have a great accountant in place and make sure that the financials is visible to show it's strictly on the business side of things.
Yeah. And I always encourage like business owners, entrepreneurs in the U.S., right? Especially after you've passed making a certain amount of money. Don't own things personally in the U.S., right? You set up the LLC to actually own land, to own your business. Nothing should be in your name because, as Stacey said, if somebody files a lawsuit against you, right? If somebody files a lawsuit against you and your name shows that you own certain real estate or own a business, they can take that if there's a judgment against you, right? However, if you have your assets set up in an LLC, then they'd have to go through the LLC and they can't go beyond that LLC in
Right.
terms of your personal assets.
Any questions on that? Okay. All right. So we're going to touch on
All right,
growth?
so,
One question
another-
here.
oh, sorry,
Yes.
go ahead.
So, as I understand it, working in the business is not possible without an E2 or one of the visa options. But in terms of paying yourself through the business, how does that work if you're not working? How is that structured? Let's say you don't have an E2.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you ask, right, is, can I take this off? All right, so you're asking if you set up a company in the U.S. and you only have a visiting visa, can you pay yourself through the company? You can pay yourself through the company if you're in Jamaica. But if you're in the U.S., you cannot pay yourself through the company because it will be considered you working illegally in the U.S. So so the money has to come out here. Yeah. And as we go along operations, right? So for my clients and people who have this in their mind in terms of, all right, I'm going to set this business up in the U.S. What about staffing, right? What about payroll? What about setting up an organizational structure? That's something that we would get you set up with as well. That is a service that we do offer in terms of actually finding the actual talent for your business that is well suited for you to survive in the U.S. Because again, I've realized that there is a gap in terms of doing business in the U.S. and you spent most of your life here and not figuring out what the compliance is. But even within staffing and setting up your organizational structure, you got to have all of that documented. And that's one thing that a lot of us aren't good at is still doing the handshake deals without having everything in writing, without having an employment agreement. If you're in the U.S. and you don't have a proper employment agreement and you have over 15 employees, you can definitely get a federal lawsuit against you for something extremely simple. So contracts in the U.S. is one of the foundation of the legal system in the U.S. So definitely something that we would guide you through and provide you with the resources is providing you with the proper contracts to make sure that you're protected. And again, I'll have to reiterate it to take it from the top. It doesn't matter if you've been in business with the person here, right, or the person is your family member. And I cannot stress this enough, how important your operating agreement and partnership agreements are. You are really exposing yourself and all the hard work that you put into. You expose yourself to losing that business or just bearing the brunt of a huge lawsuit, or the family members of that person come and taking the business away from you or some of the equity of the business. I mean, all of that can be arranged with the right retainer, you know? So,
I would definitely say one thing we will do is send you guys reminders. If you are in our book of business sure you are retained by our office. One of the things we want to make sure is that you're in compliance, because that's equally important. In the U.S., when you file a business, there are annual reports that need to be filed. Taxes need to be due. So we do not only post it on our social media platforms, we do informationals. I know you guys see him on every platform you can think of. The information we're providing is really reminders. Whether you're a client or not, we're making sure our community understands the requirements. So you'll get the reminders about tax season. You'll get the requirements about when the deadline is to ensure your business is in compliance, and if you miss that deadline, what those fees will be. And then there's a time where it's no longer a fee and it goes into abandonment. And then we have to reinstate your business. And that's something you don't want to do because you don't want to have any issues with your visa. So, yeah.
A complex case that we're working on right now, very high profile individual. And when we diagnosed their issues, the issues started from them entering the US, making a lot of money, acquiring a lot of assets, but having no, zero contracts, right? Zero contracts as it relates to, are there any partners? Who is in charge of this money? Who controls what and who controls when? Then the person acquires properties in their personal name. So now, of course, a lawsuit came, and a huge lawsuit, and now we are shuffling to try to get those properties and assets under an LLC. And if we don't get the lawsuit dismissed, then it's going to be subject to that lawsuit. So now we're having to rebuild. It's like building a plane in the sky, right? So, which is why I really realized this gap when it comes down to foreign nationals, Jamaicans, is really trying to explain compliance, but also the importance of contracts and business structure, because just like that, you can get sued. Especially the more money you make is the bigger target you'll be, especially within the industry. But the more interesting thing is that a lot of the lawsuits will not come from strangers. They'll come from people that know your business and know that you are vulnerable in terms of not having the proper protections. And then within that, we're trying to transition that person to the right visa, right? So if it all starts from the right strategy and having the right team to avoid these pitfalls in the U.S. Because, I mean, of course, in Jamaica, it's different. I mean, I don't know, but I don't really see a lot of people getting lawsuits, like civil lawsuits. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. But, yeah. So definitely something that we're fully equipped. It's been non-stop litigation. And within that, we had to get the trademarks and all that done. And it's all about protection.
So I just wanted to piggyback on that as well. When you're pitching to family members, you're pitching to people that you want to own the 50% of the business and things of that nature, non-disclosure agreements are also equally important, because you want to make sure when you're disclosing your business plans and things like that, that they sign that so they can't go ahead and recreate the business or disclose that business to any other person. For example, if you're trying to open a business in the U.S. and you have this master plan, you tell a family member in hopes that they'll be the 50% owner, and they turn around and they open it themselves. And then you'll have those type of issues. You'll have issues where that 50% owner is saying that you have no involvement in the business, and you rely so heavily on them because they're family members or people that you know, and there was nothing in writing. When you go into litigation in that aspect, everything is he say, she say. You'll spend so much more money going back and forth to determine who said what, going through emails, text messages, and it will get very costly as opposed to having one operating agreement that will detail everything, your initial contributions, your continued contribution, and your role and responsibilities to the company. So that agreement is essential, and I think it needs to be done at the same time you incorporate or before, and then once incorporated, you guys execute and sign. Yeah.
And even one document that should come before the LLC and operating agreement is the NDA, right? So a lot of times we have these business ideas and we tell a friend or even like a potential investor that, hey, I have this amazing idea or this amazing service. I'm going to move this business and do X, Y, Z. And you tell them and they take the same idea and make it as their own. So one thing I always encourage is, especially if you're just starting out, get that NDA signed before you disclose anything to someone who you don't trust. But I mean, trust is relative, right? Because a lot of times it's your family members and friends who will take your idea and make it their own and profit from it. So NDAs is something that we do a lot for our clients as well.
Well, one thing I want to say is sometimes we say family, we've been talking about family and people we know. We're piggybacking on that because that's typically the person you're going to ask to do the visas and ensure the 50%. But once you do get into the U.S., your customers and clientele will sue you for anything as well. So if you're in a service-based business and you submit an invoice and that person, and you fail to provide the services in that invoice, they will sue you, not only for the amount of the invoices, but the damages for anticipation of what they should have got in the event that the services were rendered. And if you're in a product-based business, I know a lot of people were discussing logistics, and I actually spoke to someone here. If the products don't come in a timely fashion, they can request refunds. It's a little different. I'm not sure how here in Jamaica does it if you order something and it doesn't come, if you give a grace period or things of that nature. But in the U.S., it's very strict on the timeline to perform whatever duties that you're obligated to do, whether in service or product. So that is something also you want to consider, and that's where, again, AMP Consulting provides the adequate professionals to staff to ensure you can eliminate that confusion. We are hiring professionals for your business. We are hiring individuals that will execute your vision even if you're not available, because that's also important. You'll learn, operating a business, you don't have to necessarily wear multiple hats. We hire out. We make sure that the agreements are in place and that the people you hire have roles and responsibilities to ensure that, again, everything that you desire is executed eloquently. So. No, and let me say one thing about Fiverr and Upwork. If you hire someone to do a logo or a design, they actually own it. In the U.S., upon creation is the ownership. So we also want to make sure when you go the cost-effective route, I won't say cheap, when you go the cost-effective route, make sure that that invoice requires a transfer of ownership. It could be a really quick sentence. Upon payment, that all rights to that art, logo, name, design is transferred over to you. And if that's not there, let's say you become this huge business, they can now sue you and say, you have to pay me in equity or pay me a lump sum because I own it. And for you to have that ownership, this is how much I want. So it can get real tricky. Any questions? Yes. Okay. Yes. Absolutely. So when you're interested in a franchise, we'll look over the franchise agreement, determine what is the requirements for that business. We'll disclose, now, when it comes to franchises, it's equally important of the name of the business as also the location. So if you're looking to franchise in, let's say, Dairy Queen, okay. So I live in Miami, where fitness and wellness is a huge thing. Everybody wants to look like picture perfect, right? Dairy Queen wouldn't really survive in the heart of 4 or 5 gyms, right? Because everyone's gonna say, oh, I can't eat that calories. So you're gonna make sure you market it and franchise in a location where it's going to be profitable. So those are the things that we'll discuss with you outside of just saying, okay, I want to open up a franchise here, let me file the application, let me invest, and then you invest in one that is not as profitable as other locations. Because even with franchises, every location does different numbers. No, but it's difficult in the sense of you're basing your requirements on whatever the franchise is, because they're giving us the requirements now, and as your consultants, as your attorneys, we're going to have to walk you through their requirements. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. There are very strict requirements, especially one franchise I can say is like Chick-fil-A. They are very strict, and they also require a religion base as well. So, yeah. Any other questions? All right.
All right, thank you, Stacey. So just to recap and tie in the entire night, I think this is a good section. So part of what we...
Question.
Counsel. Yeah, so that's a good question. And it's treated like a separate entity. And a lot of times the decision to open the subsidiary outside of expanding your footprint and a bottom line, it would be who is the executive that wants the immigration benefit? Who do they want to transfer? So obviously the shareholders and the decision would have to align with that if they're going to open up a subsidiary company that has a similar identity and does a similar service as the Jamaican entity. All right.
Yeah, I have a question. This was regarding the E2 visa. So I was reading online, and I know that you can't legally work. Like if you're going under the E2, you have to get paid directly from the business. But what if you're a freelancer or you have a way to make money like on a faceless, because I'm a digital marketer, which is why I'm asking. So, I run ads and all that stuff. So what if you have a way of making money like not connected to the business? Can you continue to do that? Because I'm just here thinking, if the business is not making sufficient funds yet, whereas, you're living in the US, you're going to need money to survive. So can you technically still make money if it's not under the business? Would you have to report that income to the IRS? Or would they have any way of knowing that you're making money?
I mean, if it's going into an account, you would have to declare it, absolutely. And in terms of doing another business, so you're saying if you entered on an E2 visa and you wanted to do something subsidiary?
Yes, exactly. So let's say, for example, I have an E2 visa and I'm still freelancing on Upwork, but that money is going into like I have a virtual US bank account. Would they, in other words, I'm trying to ask, would they know like you're making money? Otherwise, that's coming in from the other business. That's what I want to find out.
I mean,
Uncle Sam knows everything.
yeah. Yeah, they know everything. I mean, in terms of the source of the funds, it varies, but you'd be walking on a tightrope. Yeah. Yeah, so one thing that we wanted to provide for you in the booklets is it has a list of companies that we have in our portfolio in the event that you were interested in an E2, EB5, and you do not have a business. This is typically what we would do for a client, right? And it's up here. So you would get the name of the business, and they would actually do an actual presentation of that business, the valuation of it, the staffing. Sometimes it's turnkey. You'll get full financials. So you have a list of businesses that's available just to spark your imagination if that is the type of road that you would want to go down. And it's one of the services that we provided. All right? So just to tie everything all in, again, thank you everybody for coming. As it relates to business, for the Jamaican where a green card is just too much, right? It requires you to be in the US for 6 months or more. But the B1 visa, it's too limiting, right? The E2 visa is one of the best visas for that in terms of the speed at which you can get it, right? You can get an appointment here at the consulate in 8 weeks, right? It requires you to invest an irrevocable amount to where you are at least 50% owner of that business, right? You are able to bring your child, your children that are under 21, and you're able to bring your spouse. Great visa. The L1 visa as well, as I said, if you're a business owner already and you wanted to create a subsidiary company in the US, you can do that if the business is registered for at least 2 years and you have at least 6 to 8 employees on payroll. You can do a subsidiary business and transfer yourself as an executive, right? And you'd get an L1 visa. Again, that allows you to travel in and out of the country at will. You can stay there as long as you want, or you can stay in Jamaica and run the business, but you can go there and actually legally make money. And it does lead to a green card. Then there's the EB5. If you have 800,000 or $1,050,000 that you want to invest in a new or existing business that's going to create 10 jobs, and it goes directly to a green card, this would be the business for you. If you are a professional and you don't have a business, right, and you're like, I want to relocate. If you have an advanced degree in a niche area and you have progressive work experience that is related to your advanced degree, right, the EB2 NIW would be a really, really good visa for you, right? Typically medical professionals, researchers, engineers, this is a great way to where you can actually get a green card without doing the investment. So to break down the EB2 NIW a little bit more, it's a version of the EB2 visa. So the EB2 visa is if a company wanted to petition for you as a permanent employee, right? It's an 18-month process. They have to go through the Department of Labor, and you have to have a job offer. The difference between the EB2 NIW is it waives the job offer, right? Because your job is of national interest, and you can do a direct self-petition on your own without having a job offer, right? So the EB2 NIW really, really good for professionals. They have a carve-out exclusively for pilots, for researchers. And there's also the EB1 visa, where if you have extraordinary ability, right? Say you are advanced in your field. You've gotten certain type of accolades or certifications. If we can prove it, we can prove that you have extraordinary ability, and that is directly a green card. So, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I have another question.
Sure.
For the E2 visa, is there like, I don't know if you know it off the top of your head, but is there like any businesses or even franchises that you don't require that $100,000 USD investment to actually move to the US and operate it?
So you're asking if there's
any businesses below 100,000 where you would need to invest? Like, is there any for like 40,000?
Absolutely, yeah. So earlier we discussed, we've done the E2 investment visas for nail salons for like 50,000. We've done it for like a fencing company for 40,000. So it doesn't have to be 100,000. It just has to be directly related to that industry and related to that business.
Okay, cool, thank you.
All right. Any questions about anything that we discussed tonight?
Leading to a green card. What about the O2?
Yeah. So the O1, right? So the O2 would be like a family member or essential worker of the O1.
how long you'll have to have hold of that. For example, if you're O2 for just once, for like 2 years, would you have to go on another O2 in order to file, or can you file independent of the O1?
Yeah, you can always file independent of the O1 if you have the eligibility to be an O1, which is proof that you have extraordinary ability.
Okay, that is separate and apart from what I'm asking. For example, entertainers, they have been on O2 visas working with an artist, and they move from one O2 to another O2. So say that in the lifespan for 5 or 6 years, they have worked with like 2 artists. If they go on another O2 with another artist, can they file? Or can it be independent of the O1?
No, so the O2 always rides off the O1.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Any more questions? Yes, sir? Yeah. Yeah. He's like, yes, go back up.
Okay. So Jamaica, I believe, has JEPO? JEPO, there we go, all right. So no, it only covers the U.S., but what you can do is file a foreign trademark to show your use dates, because that's very important to show how long the business has been established, the notoriety, the trade channels. So what we do is we file it based on saying that you have it in Jamaica, and now you're requiring that same protection here in the U.S. But the difference is, I believe in Jamaica, you don't have to show you're actually using it, right? Okay. It has to be shown? Okay, so similar to the U.S., any classification that you file for has to be shown. So for example, if you have clothing, and let's say, you know, the clothing is Clarke clothing, inside the hang tag has to say Clarke clothing, and then it has to be available for sale to a consumer. If it's not available for sale, and then we don't show any type of proof, then you have to file what is called an intent to use application. And that's saying, I intend to use this in the U.S. within 2.5 years, because what happens is they'll give you a notice of allowance. Once we clear everything, the name is established, and then every 6 months, they'll give you the opportunity to show proof, or you have to file an extension. Absolutely. So filing an intent to use application, even though you have it established in Jamaica, is showing that I intend to launch in the U.S. And that way you're clearing it in the U.S. because the name could be available in Jamaica, but not in the U.S. So you're clearing that, you're ensuring that you're investing into a business you can own. So for example, when we file your application, within 6 to 8 months, and a U.S. attorney that works for the USPTO will review that application and let us know if it's clear to go. Then it's gonna go into what we call publication for 30 days, and that publication is the ability for anyone in the U.S. to say, hey, I own this name, and they can't move forward. If no one opposes it within the 30 days, then you get a notice of allowance, and that's where the 2.5-year mark comes. You have five times to file a 6-month extension. So file early, but also file with the intention to actually show use within those 2.5 years, or you're gonna have to refile after that, yeah. All right.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Okay, so my question, for the E2 visa, for example, if the requirement is 100,000 K, if you're in partnership with someone...
So just to put up in here, sorry to cut you, so there isn't a set requirement?
Yeah, that's why I said example.
Okay.
Yeah, so example is 100K. So if you're in partnership with someone and it's 50-50, are you required to put up 100 or half of that?
So it depends on the ownership, right, and the valuation of the business. So if the business is valued at 100,000 based on the industry, then there could be two separate E2s for 50% each at 50K. Yeah. Anybody? All right. Well, I just go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right, so let's just say that I am doing a franchise, right? And I am successfully making a high-up, for example, and I'm interested in doing something else. I think it's similar to what you were saying. For example, I'm interested in doing affiliate marketing. Will that would that be a problem differently from what I have invested in for the 100K business franchise?
Okay, so you have a franchise, it's successful, you're making money from it legally, but you wanted to start another business, right? So remember, the business will have its own identity. So technically, you would be able to open up a business. I mean, even somebody that's undocumented and is out of status can start their own business because the business, start the business legally and hire people, right? So you don't have to have status to open up a business and hire people. But in terms of receiving the money, that's where it can get complicated, right? Will immigration do a deep dive and say, well, you're making money here, but then we saw that you filed taxes and you have money coming from somewhere else? It's really going to be up to discretion. Would I mess with it within these next 4 years? No.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any questions? All right. Well, everybody, I really, really appreciate you taking the time out again to come out. I hope you got all of your questions answered. And if you haven't, our contact information is in the booklet. This is one of many to come. So again, I appreciate everybody taking the time out, and God bless.
Thank you.